Hi everyone! Just wanted to say that I've got really good stories for you today. The first story is extremely famous here in Japan. It's apparently true and almost everyone has heard about it. It was recently talked about on TV, kind of like the Kisaragi Station story that I shared before. It's a bit complicated, but I hope you can follow along and that you enjoy it. If you're new to this channel, it's all about true scary stories from Japan, so if you're into that kind of creepiness, please subscribe. Alright, let's get started. I work in construction, and the other day we started to demolish an old temple in Iwate Prefecture. It's a temple that hasn't been used for a while now. As I was working, I heard my colleague calling me over, so I walked to his corner of the temple. When I got there, I saw a long, dark wooden box sitting at his feet. I asked him what it was, and he told me he had no idea. He apparently found it in a sealed room at the back of the main hall, and he was about to call the contractor to ask what he should do with it. The length of the box was about 2 meters long. It seemed to be quite old, and the wood was rotting in some areas. There was a white piece of paper pasted on the front with something written on it. I could tell that some of the writing was in ancient Japanese, while others were in modern Japanese. However, the paper was so old and tattered that I could barely make out what it said. What I gathered from the broken text was that something called the Ryoumen Sukuna was sealed inside this box in July of a certain year in the Taisho era, which was between 1912 and 1926, with the aid of some Buddhist incantations. The box was nailed shut, so there was no way to open it. My colleague was told by the contractor that they'll ask the chief priest that used to be in charge of this temple the following day and to leave the box there for now. The next day, before arriving at the work site, I received a phone call from the contractor. He told me that the priest sounded vexed about this discovery and made it clear that we were not to open the box and that the priest himself would come by to take it off our hands. He said the priest was extremely serious about it, for me to take care of it, and with that, he ended the call. I decided to call the job site straight away to talk to the site supervisor. When I got him on the phone and started talking to him about the wooden box, he cut me off.
Oh yeah, that box. The 2 part-time Chinese exchange students have already opened it. You need to get here quick.
I had a terrible feeling and I hurried to the temple. When I got there were 5 to 6 people gathered around, and the 2 Chinese students were sitting near it, looking dazed. The supervisor informed me that they opened the box the night before for fun. He had a troubled expression as he told me to look inside. I slowly approached the box and peeked in. To put it simply, it contained what appeared to be a human mummy with his hands held up like a boxer would do in the ring. The only thing that was strange was that it had 2 heads. Was it a Siamese twin? I'd seen pictures of Siamese twins before, so it wasn't a completely absurd assumption, but I decided it was fake. I was told that the 2 exchange students were in shock and had not muttered a single word since they opened the box. It wasn't because they couldn't understand or speak Japanese. In fact, they were pretty advanced speakers. But no matter how much I tried to get some information from them, they remained silent and just stared off into space. Oh, I forgot to mention that the mummy had 2 heads and 2 arms on each side, so a total of 4 arms and 2 legs. It looked very eerie and creepy, but again, I assumed it was fake. Anyway, we decided to drive the 2 students to the hospital, and as we were wondering whether we should get the police involved, the chief priest, who was well over 80, arrived in a car driven by his son. As soon as he stepped out, he began yelling, "Why did you open it, you idiots?" It's the end.
It's the end now that you've opened it."
After this, he turned to his son and began yelling at him. He had a strong Iwate Prefecture accent, so I couldn't understand everything, but it seems that his son was supposed to send the box to another temple in Kyoto. He obviously hadn't done it, so the chief priest was irate. From the energy in his voice, I couldn't believe he was in his 80s. He turned back to us and asked who opened it. He said taking them to the hospital was futile and they were as good as dead. As for the rest of us who saw what was inside, he said he would perform an exorcism just in case, but again, wasn't sure whether it would work. I was honestly shitting my pants by this point, so I let him do whatever he needed to do. He hit us pretty hard on our backs and shoulders with a book of Buddhist scriptures as he chanted some kind of sutra. It was pretty long and lasted for about 30 minutes. As he loaded the box into the car, he turned to us and said,
"I'm sorry to say, but none of you will live for very long."
A while later, one of the Chinese students died at the hospital. The cause of death was a heart attack which had the doctors scratching their heads because he was young and healthy. The second student was transferred to a mental hospital. 3 colleagues of mine became bedridden due to extremely high fevers of unknown causes, and I stepped on a nail which required 5 stitches. I don't know much, but I believe that Ryoumen Sukuna is a real mummy. I think he lived an agonizing life being bullied by others due to his deformity and died with lots of anger and a grudge against humanity. I mean, the look of it was truly grotesque and not human at all. I don't know if this temple or the fact that there used to be a tiny village close by has anything to do with it. All I know is that I don't want to die young. I've always been interested in the paranormal and unexplainable phenomena, so I tried to contact the priest several times, but I was completely ignored. I was then able to find the number for his son, who's in his 50s and runs a real estate business. He's a regular man, and I was hopeful that he might be able to shed some light, so I called him and we made plans to meet up for some drinks one night. Unfortunately, he cancelled last minute, telling me that it was too difficult to tell me face to face. So, I naturally asked him to explain it over the phone, to which he reluctantly agreed. He did warn me that he couldn't tell me everything. We ended up talking for about 30 minutes that night. I'll give you a rundown of what he said from his perspective. First of all, I'm sorry for not being able to meet in person. My father was strongly against it and doesn't even want me talking to you over the phone because it's too risky. To answer your question, what you saw in the box used to be an actual person. He was born with a severe deformity and was on display like those in a freak show in the medieval period. A freak show is an exhibition of biological rarities, such as physically unusual humans and those with extraordinary diseases and conditions. He was living in the little village for the first few years of his life. However, his parents sold him off because they were struggling to make ends meet. He was sold off a few more times and eventually ended up on display in some freak show. The reason he's in a mummy-like state is because he's a sokushinbutsu, which is a type of Buddhist mummy. In Japan, the term refers to the practice of Buddhist monks observing asceticism to the point of death and entering mummification while still alive. In this case, he didn't do it willingly, but was forced to become this way, and the ones who orchestrated it was a truly evil cult. I can't tell you the name because they're secretly still active around Japan. They use practices that have nothing to do with Buddhism and things that are outright illegal. A while ago, Tachikawa Ryu was criticized for being a cult that practiced outside of Buddhism, but these guys I'm referring to now are on a whole other level. If you've never heard of Tachikawa Ryu, they were a branch of Shingon Buddhism that was founded in the early 12th century by a monk in Daigo Temple in Kyoto. He ended up being exiled in 1113 to Shizuoka Prefecture after being implicated to plot to assassinate the then reigning emperor of Japan, Emperor Toba. He was accused of practicing rites that were against the official ones of the temple, such as sexual intercourse and skull worship. This contributed to its decline and subsequent dissolution during the Edo period between 1603 and 1868. There aren't any documents left, and even if the cult is operating today, the current leader would have no connection to the past at all. The name of the man who apparently started the cult was called Mononobe Tengoku. It's obviously a fake name, so researching it won't give you any hits. So anyway, Tengoku went to the freak show and saw many deformed people, including the Siamese twin. And he bought all of them. Have you heard of the term kodoku? The kanji characters insect and poison are used. You put a few insects into a vase and you use the last surviving insect to perform some magic rituals. Well, this guy Tengoku did that with people. With the deformed people he bought from the show, to be exact. I don't know exactly where he did it, but he put them in some basement and the Siamese twin won. I don't know how long it took for all the others to die, but he ate the meat of those that died before him and had to consume his own excrements to survive, so that might give you an idea of how long he was left there for. The thing is, Tengoku had rigged the whole thing from the beginning so that the Siamese twin would win. He injured the others with a knife before locking them into the room, so they were already severely weakened. We believe he did this because the Siamese twin had some resemblance to Ashura, the war deity in Japanese Buddhism. It's known as Asura in Hindu, and Tengoku was somehow drawn to the Siamese twin because of it. So, he survived, but of course he was just a means to an end, so he was immediately transferred to a different room and left there to die of starvation. After he died, he was quickly embalmed and mummified, ultimately making him a Sokushinbutsu, or a Buddhist mummy. He decided to call it Ryoumen Sukuna based on one Japanese mythology that says there was a monster with 2 faces and 4 arms called Ryoumen Sukuna. Tengoku designated his new creation their Buddha of everything evil. He believed that through Ryoumen Sukuna he could curse someone and kill them, and bring about an even more powerful curse that could kill a large number of people at once. And his main target was the whole of Japan. He wanted to destroy Japan and bring it down. There are some people who believe Tengoku wasn't Japanese, because what Japanese person would wish something like that to occur? Anyway, that's not all. Tengoku put something inside Ryoumen Sukuna's stomach. Have you heard of the Yamato kingship? It was a tribal alliance centered around what's now Nara Prefecture from the 4th to the 7th century. They exiled a lot of people who were considered traitors and rebels. Tengoku put the bones of these exiled people into his stomach. Apparently, security around the ancient ruins and tombs were lax back then, so they got their hands on them by stealing the remains from those sites. I know it's hard to believe, but let me tell you a few disasters that occurred back in the Taisho era. 1914. Major eruption of Sakurajima volcano. 160 people killed and injured. The Great Akita earthquake. 104 people killed. Explosion at Hojo coal mine. 671 people killed. 1916. The Great Fire in Hakodate. 2,166 people affected. 1917. The Great Flood in eastern Japan. 1,324 people killed. Kirino coal mine explosion. 369 people killed. 1922. Train accident in Nadare, Oiyashi. 90 people killed. September 1st, 1923. The Great Kanto earthquake. 105,000 people dead or missing. You might be wondering, so what? Well, what if I told you that those areas were where the Ryoumen Sukuna moved? I know it sounds stupid and fake, but the cult had bases in all these different places. To top everything off, just before the Great Kanto earthquake, which was the biggest disaster of the Taisho era, Tengoku died just before the earthquake hit. He committed suicide by cutting his own throat with a sword in front of Ryoumen Sukuna, and he left a suicide note written in his own blood, which read, "Japan shall perish." Maybe it was a coincidence, maybe not, but the two of them were near the coast of Sagami Bay, which was close to the epicenter of the quake. My father never explained how Ryoumen Sukuna ended up at the temple in Iwate. About 30 years ago, I was considering following in my father's footsteps to become a monk, but I ended up not doing it. That temple has been abandoned for a long time and... yeah, I think that's as much as I can tell you. So, that was all the information he could share with me, but I got a very good understanding of what was in that box and its history. But I had to ask him 2 more things before hanging up the phone. The first was, where is Ryoumen Sukuna now? He didn't know. He apparently hadn't been able to reach his father for the past few days, and in the last conversation he had, he was told that strange cars were following him ever since he loaded Ryoumen Sukuna into his car at the temple that day. The second question was, why did you give me so much detail when you initially said that you couldn't tell me too much? To which he replied,
Remember what my old man told you that day at the temple? That you guys won't live long? So, this is it. Don't call me again.
I thanked him and we ended the call. To tell you the truth, I don't believe everything he said, but I'm feeling a bit nauseous now, so I'm going to end my post here. Good night. Let me warn you guys that this is a pretty psychologically disturbing and grotesque story, so a bit of viewer discretion is advised. It's nothing to do with ghosts or spirits. It's an experience that made me a firm believer that humans are much scarier than anything paranormal. So this happened when I was a uni student. My friends threw me an early birthday party in January. I was really happy to spend the day with them, and since our winter break started 2 weeks earlier than usual, we were enjoying the day drinking and singing in karaoke. I felt so blessed to have so many amazing friends. I received many presents that day, nothing expensive and extravagant. I mean, it was just a good excuse to get together, and we were all students, so none of us had cash to splurge on presents anyway. We were all good friends though, so they all knew the things that I liked, and so I received really thoughtful presents. I was genuinely happy about all of them. On my actual birthday, another friend who couldn't make it to the party before called me and asked to meet up. He wanted to give me his present. It was a stick of some sort. It had ochre, brown and black colours mixed in, and some parts were really smooth, while other areas looked wrinkled. I asked him what it was, and he replied that he didn't know what to get me, so he made it using ingredients that only he can get, and decided to give me his most precious creation. He added that it took him 10 years to make. I initially felt creeped out when I saw this weird stick, but when he told me it took him 10 years to make, I was immediately moved by his willingness to give me something so important to him. He was a person that wasn't very good with interpersonal relationships. Unlike my other friends and I, he was part of a computer game research club, and I had heard that he had a hard time making friends there too. When he gave me this present, even though I felt like he was missing out on some great friendships because of his difficulties in expressing himself clearly, that he was actually trying his best to interact with others in his own way. In saying all of that though, when I really looked at the stick carefully, it still creeped me out. There were multiple fingerprints on it, and there was a weird, faintly sweet smell to it. I wondered why he made something like that, but feeling like I was probably one of his only friends, I felt bad to ask him and be suspicious about it. I didn't want to make him feel even more isolated by my reaction, so I decided to just forget about it. During my 4th year of uni, the police took me into custody for a crime that I hadn't committed. I had taken a domestic trip and was at the airport when a drug sniffer dog reacted to my bag. Apparently, it had reacted to the ochre and brown parts of the stick that I always had in my possession. I told them straight away that it was a gift from a friend, so they asked me if they could do a DNA test, to which I readily agreed. When the results came back, they told me that my DNA wasn't detected, but another person's was, so I was cleared of any wrongdoing for the time being. As I was getting ready to go home, I noticed that the officer looked troubled, so I asked him what the coating on the stick actually was. That's when he told me that it was semen. I'm sorry, but even thinking about it now makes me feel sick. The guy that gave me this stick was a freak. The police informed me at a later date that the guy believed in some kind of black magic that said that if you coat some magic powder in your own semen, the person you give the stick to will fall in love with you. According to the police, they found a desk that seemed to have been used to drip his semen on and collect it. The entire surface was covered with it, making it look sticky and white. The guy apparently peeled the dried semen off, softened it back up with a bit of water, and put it into a mold. He assumed the magic powder was made of weed, so that's why the dog reacted to the stick. He painstakingly spent 10 long years making it for me, his love interest. He mixed dry weed into his semen and made a whole stick out of it and gave it to me. This is the last thing I have to say, but I'm a male, so you can imagine how I felt when I found out about this. I was never homophobic, but it unnerved me to think that another man was in love with me for that long, and to realize that he gave me his semen and I happily accepted it and carried it around with me all the time. I even smelt it and I touched it with my bare hands. Anyway, I officially have a phobia against men now. Luckily for us, there are a few comments that went back and forth between some of the readers and the guy who shared this freaky experience. I'll summarize what I thought was interesting. So, to tell you the truth, this experience only came back to me recently. I was going through a really tough time mentally and I was giving up hope on everything to do with life. So I went to see a hypnotherapist. When I was put under hypnosis, everything came back. This experience apparently traumatized me so much that I had repressed it. I was told I had to come to terms with it in order to get better. Luckily, ever since the memories came back, I'm feeling a bit better, but I don't feel like I've been saved in any way. The guy who gave me the stick was sent to prison. Details of what he was charged with is unknown, but I assumed it was because of drug possession. I was the one who got him arrested, so I'm worried that he'll come out wanting revenge. You might think he's a stalker, but he wasn't. I was actually the one inviting him to hang out most of the time. I contacted the police and told them I was worried about this guy being released from jail, and because I'm the target of an ex-convict's abnormal behavior, they agreed to increase patrols around my area. They also looked into his stint in jail and told me that he was successfully rehabilitated, which makes me feel a bit better. I was really scared to do it, but I still had the number to his house, so I contacted his parents. They informed me that he began collecting books and documents about the occult when he was only in elementary school, and his room was full of those kinds of materials. When he came home after being released from jail, he apparently stuffed everything into cardboard boxes and threw it all out. After that, he began working at a sheet metal factory, which was something he learned while incarcerated, and he invites his co-workers to his house sometimes. I'm happy to hear that he has improved his quality of life. However, I will never contact him again, and I'll do my best to forget this awful experience and his entire existence. Now, there was another interesting comment made by a reader, and it goes like this. I'm sorry I don't have all my documents with me right now, but I can assure you that what your friend gave you was a kind of curse. It wasn't some innocent love spell. Technically speaking, the direct effect is created by causing disgust and fear within you, and it's amplified by using cadavers, but in this case he used his bodily fluids. He also injected 10 years of pure madness into it. Seeing that you had repressed your memories about it and it only came back recently is like he already killed you once. I would highly recommend you to seek out an exorcist that specializes in Western black magic, because using semen as an ingredient in a spell is often a technique used for curses in devil-worshipping societies. So, that's the end to this story. What did you guys think of it? I 100% believe that this is a true story. If any of you have heard of this type of curse or black magic, please let me know in the comments, because I'm curious whether a spell like this actually exists. I tried to Google it and get more information, but I couldn't find anything. Now, on to the third and final story for this week. It's a bit lighter than the previous two, but still has the creepy factor. Enjoy. I attended 2 different elementary schools due to my parents' jobs, and for one of them, I was there less than a year. Although it was a short time, I had a very strange and creepy experience there. When I first transferred, I was popular among my classmates because they were all curious about me and where I came from. I was the center of everyone's attention for a while, as they asked me a bunch of questions pertaining to my previous school and would always ask me to play with them. A girl in my class named Mia was not amongst them. She always watched me from a distance. She wore glasses and looked shy on the outside, but she was our class president and sort of had this calm air about her that was more mature. Sometimes when I was being pulled in all different directions by my other classmates, she would swoop in and tell everyone to back off a little. When I was lost and didn't know where something was, she would ask me if I needed any help. And if I didn't understand something in class, she would invite me to the library and help me study. She was really kind and helped me out when I was in situations like that. Thanks to Mia, I quickly got used to everything in school and I wanted to get to know her a bit better, but I could never bring myself to approach her first. And that was because there was another girl that was always with her. Her name was Michie. Unlike Mia, she was an energetic girl that was the typical pretty type. Whenever Mia and I would begin a conversation, Michie always butted in and interrupted us. It would make things awkward and our conversation would trail off, always making me feel annoyed. A few months passed like that until one day Mia was absent. And she was never absent. I was wondering what happened to her when our teacher came running into the classroom. She informed us with an ashen face that Mia had passed away the day before. The entire class went silent. Everyone was in shock, and like me, I'm sure they were trying to make sense of this horrible news. How did she die? What happened? I then began to hear sniffling around the room as one student began to cry, then another and another. Apparently, she had drowned in a river near her house, and the estimated time of her death was when she should have been at cram school. It was unclear why she was by the river at that time. The police concluded it was an accidental death. She skipped cram school without telling anyone, went to the river to kill time, slipped and fell in. She hit her head as she did so and drowned. The day that we were told about her death, I overheard one of my classmates talking during recess. When Mia was discovered, she was apparently holding something in her hand. It was a friendship bracelet made of red thread. I don't know how credible it was, but the rumor spread like wildfire around school. Everyone seemed to wonder why she had that bracelet in her hand, but I knew straight away. Michie always had a red friendship bracelet on her left wrist. I turned around to look at her. She should have been devastated by the news, considering she was always with Mia, but I was wrong. She was sitting at her desk, grinning. It completely caught me off guard and I flinched as I stared at her. And then she noticed me looking at her and our eyes met. I will never forget her face. She continued to grin at me as she raised her left hand. She wriggled it around to show me, and that's when I saw that her bracelet was gone. An instant chill went down my spine and I got scared, so I turned back around. I felt like I saw something that I shouldn't have. I looked down at my hands and trembled in fear, Michie's evil smile plastered in my mind's eye. But that wasn't the creepiest thing that happened. That afternoon, after making sure that Michie had gone home, I went to my friends and started telling them about what I had seen. It's not like I wanted to badmouth Michie. She was Mia's best friend, and yet she was smiling upon hearing about her death. I just wanted to hear what my friends thought about it, because I felt like there was something more to it. I also didn't want to be the only one who knew about the bracelet. After I finished telling my friends about it, they all looked at me with a puzzled look and said, who's Michie? The question caught me off guard. It wasn't possible that they didn't know who she was, considering I was the new student, not them. I explained who Michie was, the pretty girl that was always hanging out with Mia. It didn't help. They were clueless and had no idea who I was talking about. I was baffled and I started to feel worried, so I began asking my other classmates, but the response I got was the same. No one knew who Michie was. How was that possible? I ran to find the teacher. He told me that a student by that name wasn't in our class and even showed me our class roster. He was right. Michie's name was nowhere to be seen. Then who was she? According to my friends, Mia was a very quiet girl and didn't have any close friends. That went against everything I had witnessed up to that point. Michie was always with her, always standing by her side. She was the entire reason why I couldn't become closer friends with Mia. After that day, I never saw Michie again. I never found out who she was, and I ended up transferring to another school shortly after. Even today, my heart begins to race when I think back on this experience. I still suspect that she had something to do with Mia's death.